when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s as a Gen Xer. Basically, today, there are policies in place at schools. Here, anyway. I don't know what it's like everywhere. I haven't lived in that many places. But here, where I'm from, schools have policies in place. They're called something like anti-bullying. Now, with anti-bullying, that often fails. It's not a foolproof system. For example, I know of a girl in town who was bullied, and this was after the year 2000, so of course, social media was a factor in it. And they bullied her online. We didn't have that problem when I was growing up. We didn't have any of that social media, a way to take a photo and make fun of somebody and plaster it on the internet. That wasn't a thing. We had face-to-face communication. We had in-person fights. Everybody got bullied, picked on in fights. I did upload a video about this a while back, probably end of August, maybe September. My grandfather actually taught me how to fight. So when I had enough of the bullies, he put me in a barn for a year, taught me how to box. And he himself was a boxer. So I learned from somebody who was in the know. If you didn't like somebody or they didn't like you, the norm back then was they would take you out back in the schoolyard and fight. So when I learned how to fight, nobody picked on me anymore because I learned how to stick up for myself, advocate for myself, and other kids could see I wasn't one to mess with because I could fight. So they weren't about to pick on me or invite me to the back of the schoolyard. And that's just one example of many things that we went through prior to the 1990s. I'll just say that, like a blanket, prior to the 1990s, this is how it was. But then again, we didn't have the online bullying that's out there today. Would I have survived that if I was a kid? You can't fight that with your fists, right? It's computer, it's a video, it's a photo, it's on the internet. How are you going to fight that? You can't just throw somebody in a barn and say, fight. Learn how to protect yourself. Hold your hands up in front of your face. Wrap your knuckles. Can't do that. It's a video. It's a text. It's an email. It's whatever. Post it all over the internet. You take a video. You don't even need to take a video now. You have AI. People out there want to bully somebody. They can just AI it and make fun of them. Like if you're a 10-year-old and somebody does that, it's not funny. It can be very, very damaging. Where in my generation, we didn't have that. It was in person. Somebody had something to say, they said it to your face. Somebody had a beef with you, they took you out back in the schoolyard and you fought in front of a crowd. No, there were no cell phone cameras, but that stuck with you because everybody knew what happened. We had a different level of bullying. It was in your face, personal, direct, confrontational. There were no anti-bullying schools. There were no anti-bullying policies. Teachers turned their head. I've seen teachers leave the room. That's a fact. So, comparably to today, no, we didn't go through what kids go through today. Today, well, I think they call Generation X the feral kids because we were out on our own all the time. We didn't have much adult supervision. We basically raised ourselves. But today, think about how much endurance and resilience. I always say I'm resilient because of my upbringing, right? But think about the endurance and resilience somebody needs today in the social media world. If I was a kid today, I think I would have turned out very differently. I might have not been able to learn how to advocate for myself, defend myself, because you can't defend yourself against a computer. You can't defend yourself against electronics. This girl I knew in town, she got bullied by her classmates, and we had to have a meeting as parents. So we went to the school because this was a first for them, that a kid got bullied by electronic devices or social media, okay? And they brought in some programs. They brought in the police department. So we all had to sit down and go through this. We all got packets of information and how to teach our kids not to be bullies and what to do if they are bullied, that kind of thing, right? But it's not fail-proof, because I do know of children who were bullied, and the school, they didn't necessarily turn a blind eye, but they didn't know how to deal with it. And instead of taking care of the one bullying the other student or students, right, they blamed the victim. So these anti-bullying policies that are there to protect children today aren't fail-proof. So the reason I'm bringing all that into it is because I wanted to share a story that happened to me. And so you can see how it's different from my raising till now. When I was being raised, like I said, 70s, 80s, prior to 1990s, in my school, teachers were allowed to use force to hit and strike students. Now, I know in some states, you have the paddles. We didn't have that here. It wasn't a paddle. It was a yardstick. I remember clearly my grade school teachers had yardsticks. And one particular class I had, now I was still, oh my goodness, I don't know how old I was at this point, 8, 9, maybe 10. I doubt I was even 10. There was a kid in my class, and he was an orphan. I mean, he had a mom, but his dad passed. He had a heart attack or stroke or something. Young, too, this guy. And the mom was left to raise these boys by herself. And she had to work round the clock to care for them. It was a super sad situation. Everybody knew this kid's living condition. He lived in a really rundown shack with his siblings and mother, okay? And this kid had nothing. He got free lunch, and I think that's all he had to eat ever. So, you know, taking that situation, the teacher, and I can remember as clear as day in my head, she had a yardstick, but the boy picked his nose. And she put him behind a cardboard box in his desk. Now, could you imagine if that happened today? What would happen? You hear somebody's child was putting a cardboard box around his desk. That wouldn't fly today. You know what I'm saying? But back then, that's what happened. She put a cardboard box around that student's desk so he couldn't look at us and we couldn't look at him because he picked his nose. And in addition to that, she used that yardstick. If he tried to get up out of his seat without raising his hand or something, she would snap that yardstick on his cardboard box. And it was cruel, humiliating. Now, today, I would hope that that wouldn't happen. I mean, if that happened, you know there would be a giant uproar. However, if it did happen today, you know there would be somebody with a cell phone recording it, which wouldn't help the case because then it would go viral everywhere. But then on the other hand, maybe it would help his case because maybe people would be speaking out for him. So there's good and bad to it. In my day, if somebody wanted to fight me, but the principal said, oh no, she'll hurt you, she's tough. I'm like, so am I. I'll show you. And he was like, just go home. I don't want her to hurt you, blah, blah, blah. That's how it was. We didn't have somebody telling her to knock it off. We didn't have somebody putting her in detention or following an anti-bully protocol to remove her from the class or lunchroom or wherever it was or recess. No, they sent me home because she was threatening to bully me and hurt me. I wasn't afraid. I was like, bring it. But nope, they sent me home. That is the difference between then and now. And another thing too is that principal, that same principal, he used to come to school drunk. He was in the newspaper at least 5 or 6 times in 1 year for driving his car off the road while drinking. And don't forget, this is a time before seatbelts. It was a time before any type of child protection groups out there. It was a time before kids had to sit in the back or in a booster seat or in a car seat or in a seat belt. We sat up front in a little hump, and almost went through the windshield every time somebody came to a halt. We do need something better today. They do have the anti-bullying, which there's both sides. I agree with it, but then there's a portion that I think they need to work on. The foolproof protections are just not there for anti-bullying. In fact, even when a parent tries to reach out around here, I don't know about everywhere, okay? When I talk, it's just my own personal experience. around here, when you try to reach out to, say, the police station to get some help for a child being bullied or something like that, they literally say you have to go to the school. They do not help you. They say it's out of their jurisdiction. They're not going to get involved. You have to go to the school where it's happening. The school has jurisdiction, even when the bullying happens off school grounds. Now, to me, that's crazy, but that's how it is. I have heard Ohio has one of the best school systems for anti-bullying. Maybe the schools should all get together and see what they do and try to model after that. I'm glad I had the upbringing I had. I'm not damaged by the culture of the 80s. I'm not damaged by the fighting out in the schoolyard. I'm not damaged by the mean kids that wanted to pick on me. I'm not damaged by that at all. I don't recall anybody actually needing therapy back then. I don't recall that. However, now in all fairness, I have to say this. There was a huge stigma against that. I know, like, my older folks and older relatives were dead set against any kind of mental health help or going to a psychiatrist or going to a therapist. They shamed that back then. They thought that was humiliation and nonsense. They did not say, this is for your well-being. Oh, no. And maybe people today don't realize that. The younger generations, because they're born into this society of mental health crisis and mental health help and all these things online where you can sign up for a therapist and you can go to a therapist and there's a therapist here every street corner. That is true. That back then, yeah, nobody would talk about that. You got beat up, they gave you a pack of frozen peas and said to put ice on it. Nobody really told you how to deal with it either. You just learned. We did grow up resilient, though. We did grow up strong. However, having said that, I think kids today, they don't have that opportunity. They don't have that opportunity to, like, fight back. And I'm just talking out loud here now because it's right off the top of my head. It's like, think about it, right? You have kids today being bullied on the internet or being bullied with a cell phone or being bullied with an iPad or being bullied online somehow. And how do you fight back to that? So they don't have an outlet for that. They don't have a way to learn how to fight and knock the kid out like we did, right? They can't do that because that's assault now. It's illegal. And I'm all for learning how to advocate for yourself, and I preach it all the time. However, even I have a problem understanding how is somebody supposed to fight back to that. So now that I'm thinking and talking about this out loud, I think vigilance is the answer. Just be aware. Awareness, that's a good one. To transition through this next cycle of where we're having AI do the bullying. If you get my drift, it's no longer going to be students doing the bullying to students, even though there's anti-bullying laws. It's now going to be AI doing the bullying. When I say advocate for oneself, that's really not a fair statement if you take it at face value. When you're up against somebody bullying you on an iPad saying, well, advocate for yourself, that's not a fair parallel. Where if you have a bully in the playground and your father says, well, go beat him up because they want to come after you, and if you finally stick up for yourself, they won't hurt you anymore, right? That was 70s and 80s. So now we have the iPad epidemic, or the technology epidemic, or the social media epidemic. How do you do that? That could probably just frustrate somebody more, now that I'm thinking about it. And I think it comes from within. The strength, courage, and that self-preservation and self-advocating comes from within. So I think first, we build up our youth. We build up these next generations. We build up our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to have that confidence that we learned because we had no choice. We were out there fist fighting. We were out there getting bullied. We were out there on the playground until 10 o'clock at night with no supervision. That confidence came from that. Kids today are not out there. They're not socializing. I just uploaded a park video not too long ago, a couple weekends ago, I think. Nobody was at the park. These $1 million parks that are costing taxpayer money here, nobody's playing at them. I was the only one for a couple of the parks. They're not playing at the park. They're not socializing in person. They're not getting that fresh air. They're not getting that exercise we got, running up and down a slide ladder, or jumping on a swing and swinging, or running around a playground. They don't do that anymore. They're inside on their electronics. So I think that's my message today. If I'm comparing my generation, which had no anti-bullying, which had no child protections in place, it was basically a free-for-all back then, till today, where you have political correctness, anti-bullying policies, so-called protections that are not fail-proof, but are there somewhat, and technology that's getting more dangerous, even though it can be helpful. At the same time, it's also can be problematic. And that's where I feel like I need to step up to the plate and say, okay, I was taught through the fist fighting, resilience, and how to hold up my head and how to hold it up high. Kids today aren't taught anything like that. Even though we don't have body shaming anymore, and mental health is available everywhere you go, they're lacking the confidence. So at the end of the day, even with the mental health, the meds, the anti-bullying, and all the other protections and policies governments came out with, and schools came out with, and towns came out with, the one thing they're lacking is internal confidence. I am grateful for the resilience and the confidence, and that is one differentiator in generations. Confidence is not meanness. Today, confidence looks more like meanness than a true inner strength. Thanks for watching. Take care.